Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for the start of a new series or a new playlist, Watercolor Wednesday. So these midweek videos will still sometimes be tag time, but I also have decided I want to do a bit of watercolor playing. So sometimes we might just do some color mixing. There might be a particular color focus, brush strokes, little bits of this and that. But one of the main things will be a sort of continuing series of painting my botanical stamps for PaperArtsy, designed for PaperArtsy. Those that don't know, these are, almost all of them are developed from original watercolor paintings of mine done over the years, many of them for Inktober. If you're interested in seeing more of those, then do have a look. So there is the blackberry. Look at that, straight from that original painting. I'll link to the flip throughs of these watercolor paintings, botanical paintings, in the description below. So I've made simple cards for samples in previous years when I released these spring stamps, and what I really want to do is just work through these are for something else, so I put them aside, but I want to create a series of those that I can keep. So it's going to be very simple, and I might not even talk for lots of these videos. I might just put some music on and let you watch what's going on, because it will mostly be fairly self-explanatory, I think. And also, yeah, I'm still on the journey with watercolours, and so I don't want to sit here and kind of go, I'm a watercolour expert, because that isn't the case. I'm a watercolour experimenter, and I adore them, and I'm still discovering the things that they get up to. So we're going to have a play on some of this rather impressive bamboo watercolor paper I got when I was working in Germany recently. I met it in a shop. I've looked at it online and been curious, but you know, didn't want to risk it without feeling it in person. Found it in an art shop. Actually, did I get in? No, I think I got it in Holland. I've been working everywhere. So these are about the right size for cutting in half and being able to get one of each on each. So I'm going to cut this in half. That'll give me a chance. And I think I'm still in the mood for acorns. I was doing some acorns the other day, and I think it's going to be acorns. So these were some of my first imagery stamps. I had a whole collection of quote stamps, first of all, for PaperArtsy. That's the words. And these were some of my first little sketches. They come with theatrical ephemera, personal family ephemera, and yeah, obviously always quotes. And then from Culpeper's Herbal, amazing 17th century book where Thomas Culpeper collected information about the benefits of all kinds of botanical medicines, tinctures, concoctions, and tincts. 1653. Yeah, that's 17th century. Good. Okay. So yeah, so we're going to do a bit of that today. I'm going to cut this paper in half because I don't need the whole of it. Get my craft mat. I've got on the table today my Daniel Smith paints. So these I bought over the years when I was working regularly in the US in tubes. So I fill up these pans myself when they get empty, as they frequently do. I top them up from those tubes, and so far those tubes are lasting really well. They're expensive, they feel expensive, but these have already been going for what, 6-7 years, and none of the original tubes I bought have emptied yet. Right, let's get on with it. For once in a while I'm stamping in black because I want these to look like vintage book illustrations. The image is designed that you can have it at all kinds of angles coming in onto whatever you're using, but obviously with the Latin attached, I'm going to go for that being straight on for once. And this paper is very slightly textured, not hugely, but you can get a decent stamping on it, but you do need to make sure you're well inked and that you give it a good firm pressure down across the whole piece. See, okay, that is straight with the grid lines, so let's trust it and go with straight grid lines. It feels off because that one's going at a weird angle. but I'm going to try and trust the writing to be straight. There we go, good contact. Nice stamping. So I'm working with silver black velvet brushes. Really nice. This is a round 8 and I think it's a round as well, around 2. Very fine. And these are small images. That's the size of my fingernail, I would say, that Acorn. So being subtle with them is nice. Going to work with leaves that are sort of on the turn. Actually, I might just give all of the paints a little bit of a spritz. I'm going to try and work with a fairly limited palette. I'll try and remember to tell you what colours I'm using as I use them, if I continue talking. But otherwise I will of course be listing ingredients used today down below. This is green gold. And I'm just going to apply a bit of it and then get watery to spread things out. With watercolours they say use as large a brush as you can to start off with. A little brush kind of encourages you to be a bit precious and perfect. So staying loose and soft is helped by using a slightly larger brush. That's sap green coming in. So as I say, I want to work sort of as the leaves are turning. And I'm letting that colour blend and mix on the page. And nickel azo yellow is a wonderful colour because it kind of, as you put it in, it does its own mixing and blending, and it's great for leaves. Particularly leaves on the turn, because it gives you that sort of sense of colour shifting. Going to go with some little hints of the orange that is to come. That's Aussie red gold. Just where the sunlight is hitting those leaves. The translucence of leaves on the turn is one of nature's wonders when the sunlight hits them. If you follow me at Bohemian Home, which is where I share photos of the countryside I'm surrounded by and the garden, in the next few months there will be many photos of leaves on the turn, I guarantee it. Might start with that same Aussie red gold just as a first little hint of colour on these acorns. So with watercolours you can mix your paint in advance, and a craft mat is great for that because it will let you mix up tones as a palette, or you can use, as I do, as you can see very often, the palette on my tin set. Or you can use a china plate, or I have some rather wonderful just plastic trays that I got, I think, in Target. Again, when I was working in the US, you've seen this one before. This is where I have lots of mixed media-y paints to go, but that's what that is. It's a sort of melamine tray, and it's great for just using as a palette. Going to let that dry a little bit. So the other thing with watercolour is just learning by doing. That's the best way to learn about the degrees of fluidity, the degrees of the amount of paint versus the amount of water, and the difference between applying paint, as I did when I used the nickel azo yellow, into something that's already wet, where it's going to move and blend by itself, or letting things dry a little bit and then putting colour over the top, which is a form of glazing in the official watercolour world. That's what they call it. I've got this leaf here. So you can mix colours in advance on your palette to get the tone you want. You can mix colours by simply adding them wet into wet, or you can mix colours by glazing wet over some that's already dried, and that will give you layers of colour. So you'll alter the colours underneath simply by putting another glaze of colour over the top. So when you apply your next layers are going to make a difference to how those colours mix. If I wait till that's dry, then one thing will happen. If I put it on wet, okay, so there's what lots of watercolourists would consider the risk that you'll get a bloom if you put wet paint into more wet paint, particularly if it's watery wet paint. It will cause the colours to spread out and create sort of textures within the colour. I love that. I love a good bloom because I love the texture it gives me. Putting a bit of sepia now along the lower part of the branch here. There goes the little train. Seriously, it really goes very infrequently. I don't know how I always manage to time my filming. Well, it's partly because I'm going for lighting conditions. And those lighting conditions in the morning are some of the times when the train goes. So again, you can see I'm staying pretty loose, not doing anything major, and I've left the whole top half of that branch clear because I'm going to leave some of it white to catch the light. Shiny twigs do catch the light, but I'm now coming in with what I think is a bit of burnt umber. I wasn't really looking at the name, I was going by the colour in the tray for what I wanted next. So I'm also going to, is it burnt umber? It is burnt umber, look at that. So that I know I've got some on the tray here, so I've just picked up a bit of that from the pan and I'm just loosening what's already in the tray. So all these little bit of dried paint, all they need is a bit of water added and they will magically come back to life. So I'm creating texture through this bit of branch. Do love a knobbly branch. And I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber into these acorn shells. So that is mostly dry, what's on there, but not everywhere. So you're probably getting quite a good example of what I was just talking about all in one go, because one of those acorns was dry, and so what I applied was a glaze of burnt umber. It just went straight over the top. This one's still wet in wet, so it's mixing as it goes on. And so I'm also applying for dimension. I seem to have hit something darker than burnt umber there, but that's fine. We'll let it spread out and do what it's doing, just to get the depth in and around the cup there. This one I'm not enjoying very much at the moment. It's too bold in its colour differences, so I'm just going to let that paint spread out, and I think the same here. This on the acorn shells, I used grey titanium. So if you're seeing a colour in action that you've never heard of, this is rare green earth, going on to add a little bit of detailing in those acorn shells. What did I just hit? I feel like I dipped that into something else. So rare green earth is a really beautiful grey green. So as I was saying, if you see something in the colours here and you think, ooh, I'd like to hear more from that colour, leave me a comment. Tell me which colours you're interested in, and we might try to do some colour mixing and colour explorations. One of my plans is to, for instance, take a colour like, I don't know, green gold that we started with, and mix it with multiple other colours in some swatching, and just see what we can get from that one colour. So again, just adding some shading. Also in the comments, let me know, is it helpful to you if I keep talking about what I'm doing? I mean, if you want me to be quiet, you can always turn the volume down and just put on some of your own music that way. And so you can have a nice relaxing time. So maybe it is better if I continue to chatter about the things I'm doing. But there might be long pauses, because the other thing with this is I need to spend time in communion with the paints, noticing what's happening, looking, and just kind of being present with the movement of the paint. The other thing with watercolour is it's really tempting to fiddle and fiddle and fiddle and fiddle. Coming in with some burnt sienna light, which is an incredible burnished colour for autumn. We could maybe spend some time mixing up some leaf colours. So that was still wet. That's leaked into my shell. As long as I get in there with a bit of paper towel. So watercolour pigment will travel where there is moisture. If you get rid of the moisture, it can't do the travelling. So now you can see I'm glazing, and where I had shaping, that shaping and that depth of colour is still available, even though I've glazed over the top. And the other thing you can do with watercolour is what's called lifting. So I can come back in with a dry brush. You can see I'm just pulling the moisture and the pigment off it, and lift up some of that colour to just give me a sense of light catching those acorns. Make them both dimensional and a little bit shiny. I think that might do. What I'm going to do is let that dry, and then I'm sort of minded to flick a little bit of maybe pumice stone, Distress Ink, to create a kind of vintage paper background. Just again lifting a bit of colour away to revisit some of that detail. And even when things are dry, you can still, very often, if you're working with good paper and good paint, you'll be able to still get a lift of colour, just adding a bit more autumnal decay into some of those leaves. Yeah, I think that might be going to do me for now. I'll experiment with how far to zoom in. My problem with zooming in too far is I think this is also relevant, seeing how the colours come out of the pans, how I'm mixing them up there. So I don't really want to zoom so far in that you're just seeing the paint applied. But maybe it would be good to do a couple of videos where that's the case and a couple of videos where it's not, and so on and so forth. As I say, let me know in the comments below what you would find useful or interesting or playful. Sort of tempted just to echo minimally the acorn colour into those leaves. Just a little sort of hint of it. Nice. And actually where I've lifted up that colour, that's giving that leaf a lovely subtle look. Grand. Going to let that dry a little bit. Do let watercolours dry. Of course you can heat set watercolours, but there's something about just letting those continue to move while they're drying that will give you a more of a freshness. Heat set it by all means if you want to. And also the other thing to bear in mind is watercolours do fade a little as they dry. That's what happens. That's not a fault in your watercolours. They will always be paler once they have dried than they are at the point of application. Grand. I'll be back maybe just for a close-up, maybe to flick a little bit of pumice stone Distress Ink around, or we could use the grey titanium. We'll see. Back shortly. My slight hesitation about using grey titanium, which as you can see is one of my all-time favourite colours, it's almost empty again there, I'm going to have to top it up again, is that it is quite an opaque granulating colour, and in terms of ink splots in the background, I think I might be better going with something like Sepia, which is here, but creating a very watery translucent mix of it. Maybe we mix in a bit of Payne's grey to create more of a dirty wash. That's going to be quite interesting, I think. So having the white craft mat at this point. This, again, I will add the details down below. This is the Wow Premium Embossing mat, essentially for embossing. Let's use the spatter brush, the good old spatter brush, rather than the posh watercolour brush, because what I want is a subtler spatter. That's going to give me quite full-on spatter. So you'll see this is going on fairly dark, but as long as I get to these splats while they're still wet, I can knock them back really quite substantially. Let's have a little bit more of that. And it's just creating that sense of depth and age, mottled, sort of fly-bitten old paper. What I might do with Distress ink is do a little bit of inking around the edge. That could be nice. Or, well, let's see what happens. I've got an inky sponge here. What happens if I do that with a little bit of watercolour? Interesting. So I'm going to go in immediately and soften that just with a watery brush, because I don't like the hard edge of it. That's not sort of truthful about old pages. But if I go in with just water, just allow that paint to move a little bit, that's rather nice. So that was, what was it, Sepia and Payne's grey on the mat. Just going to let it come in a little bit where we've got the text. Grand. So there will be, as we go, a series of these developing botanicals created with my PaperArtsy stamps. I'll zoom in for a close-up as always and take you for a little tour around these paint palettes as I go, but that's a pretty good start, I think, to Watercolour Wednesday. Let me know if you're excited about more Watercolour Wednesdays. And as I say, if there are colours you'd like me to explore with, colours you want to investigate, let me know, and we'll have a play together. Thanks so much for watching, and happy painting all.